Namaste.
Good morning.
One of the dharanas, one of the methods that is described is the simple practice of tuning into the Om sound. We talked about that yesterday. The Om sound is a high electrical sound that, of course, in order to hear that, you have to get really quiet first. You have to gather yourself, and this divine consciousness that we talked about yesterday depends on not having any thought constructs. You can't be thinking about your everything, this or that. Of course, thoughts will come automatically, but you cannot be following them, attached to them. You know, you can just observe them go into the background. But in order to really hear this very subtle sound, you have to get yourself quiet. You have to get yourself centered, collected, and then when you get in touch with that stillness, you can really hear, feel that very subtle electrical sound comes in the top of the head, and if you tune into that and pull it into yourself, you know, you can just do that, and it's very nourishing, and you do feel, eventually, if you do it long enough and deeply enough, you do feel your basic divine consciousness. That's what it leads to. And also, you can do that while you're doing the Soham or Hamsa. This text talks about it as Hamsa mantra. It's simply that you follow the breath and the exhalation, and in between the inhalation and exhalation, there's a still point. There's a still point up here. And you know, you feel the stillness of those still points expanding, and then the mantra itself, which means I am that, just filling you instead of your thoughts, instead of any kind of attachment to any sensory experience. So this is a very powerful thing, and it is included in the dynamic stillness practice already, but it's interesting to see that it's spelled out in these ancient texts. So this text is Vijnana Bhairava. It means divine consciousness. Another text is Pratyabhijna Vidayam, which means the secret of recognition. So everything we talked about yesterday had to do with that. How do we come to recognize our own divine nature? You know, and you can call it by so many names: Christ consciousness, divine consciousness, naked awareness. Different traditions call it different things, but they are all pointing at this experience of our absolute nature, which is not dependent on any judgment, focus, language, or action. It is free of all those things. It just is. Now maybe you don't have the idea that you want to become liberated into that divine consciousness. Maybe you're just fine, you know, being in your ego identity. And this is okay, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you have this yearning from somewhere, somehow, to really be more immersed, more aware of your deepest nature, where there are no problems, there just is a sense of being. And of course you will never be totally in that state, because if you were, you would just burn up instantly and be, you know, you wouldn't need a body anymore, or a mind, or any of that. So it's always a question of moving in and out of that state. And when you are not in it, then, you know, the ego becomes more ascendant, your ego identity. And that's nothing wrong with that. You need that to function in the world. But eventually, we can become skilled at moving into this room of divine light that we are. Even in the middle of a very, very, very challenging or difficult situation, you can still have the ability to move into that and have that awareness while you go through whatever it is you're going through. One other dharana is that any kind of very strong emotion that you have, anytime you have a very strong emotion or a very strong desire, you can just observe it and you can follow it to its source. Not get caught in it, you know, and start then to think about, oh, what is this? What should I do? You know, because the more you engage your ego with that, the more you try to control it, the worse it gets. So there's only one solution, actually, and that solution is independent on what you actually do. You can act on a desire, or you can not act on it. Both are equally good, as long as you do it in a non-attached state. And then you, of course, being in a non-attached state, you are in touch with that divine energy, and you must then be prepared to accept the consequences of your movement. Because every movement has consequences. But anything can be a learning experience. So even if that movement, maybe as you do it, you would say, oh, I did it, but it was really a mistake. It screwed up other parts of my life, or this or that. Okay, that is the consequence, and then you have to learn from that and start again. So I don't really think there is such a thing as a mistake, as a negative thing in my book. I mean, anything can be a learning experience. But the critical issue is to be in a non-attached state and to move with that awareness that here is a deeper consciousness that I can draw from and that is free of worries.
So what you're saying is that it is possible to this tradition to step out of the ego. And
absolutely.
Look at it.
Yeah.
And be with it.
This is exactly the point, Jayadeva. You know, you are no longer a victim of your ego. You know, your ego is functioning, of course, yeah, because you have to be in the world.
Yeah, I have to go to NATO.
Yeah, exactly. So, but you can be in that transcendent or deeper state while you are allowing your ego to do its thing. I mean, it's simple and practical. It means that instead of being caught in the ego, you know, and just having yourself on automatic doing all these things, and then all these negative karmic things get created, you have some sense of humor about your ego. Well, there I am again. I'm reacting to this or that. When you gain the ability to be in the ego and see it for what it is, then it's, you know, it is like the tiger that becomes a paper tiger. It's not something that threatens you, it's not dangerous, and you have some humor about it, you know, whether it's ego that blames everybody else or whether it's ego that blames yourself. okay, fine, there I am. I have my old patterns show themselves again. But you don't get defeated by it, you know? You can have that sense of non-attachment. And the more you practice, the more you can enter into this awareness of your divine consciousness. And it starts, you know, by having some glimpses of it, and then it moves into really having longer periods of awareness of it, and then finally you end up having the ability to manage it, to open the door and walk in anytime you want to that. And you have, after a while, you have that awareness even in the middle of all kinds of sometimes unpleasant ego situations. And then, you know, you can sit in a meeting and all the big egos are involved and your ego might react, but you don't allow yourself to react to the point that it is disturbing. You step back, you're in your non-attached state, and you know, it's all a real circus, you know. And the world is crazy, and we are crazy. It's not a pleasant thought, and it's not something that I say, you know, from above down and saying everybody's crazy. I'm crazy too, like everybody else. The ego is crazy. You know, it has just been so conditioned to this fight or flight mode, and goes on automatic and does all these kinds of things, and suddenly you're in the middle of something that you never planned, you know. So really the practice is extremely useful in everyday life. And these various dharanas from that text I mentioned goes through various ways that you can do that. And it basically says that if you just take even one of these things and do it every day, regularly, for at least, it doesn't say half hour, but you know, I say if you do it at least for a half hour and maintain some consciousness of it, you will be liberated from this ego attachment.